Welcome back, everyone, to the Disaster Tough podcast, where we share insights into the big plays and right calls of leadership. We dive deep into the stories, lessons learned, and ideas that will help you in the field. Let's go. Welcome back to the Disaster Tough podcast. I'm your host, John Scardina. We are entering into our 6th season for DTP. Thank you for everybody who's tuned in. I think at this point, the last time I checked, so it was several episodes again, I think total we've spoken over 2.5 million words on the episode between the guests and I. And so grateful for everybody who's come to the podcast, as well as all of you. I think we have something like 500,000 downloads at this point, which is pretty exciting. So again, all emergency services, thank you. But with that, as always, I am so excited for this week's episode. This week I get to talk to Krista. She and I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had a conversation with some other people, some other folks. And while she was talking, I was getting like all these cool vibes of like, this person knows what they're doing. I was so excited to talk to her. And I just immediately after that conversation, I reached out to her and said, I got to get you on the podcast. You're good people. And we want to hear from her. So with that, Krista, welcome to the show.
John, thank you so much. And it's hilarious. I got literally the same vibes from you. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's amazing. So this is just an honor for me. Thank you.
I don't know how much somebody paid you to say that or to do that. That usually doesn't happen very often, but I appreciate it. I think you and I vibe on a great level because you've actually done the job. You care a lot about the mission. You care a lot about improving the mission, and all those things hit, all pistons, right? Like that fires for me in such a real way. For you, I've been doing emergency management or adjacent for about 20 years now. And I've been able to keep that passion. I've seen other people. There's ebbs and flows everywhere, but man, burnout is real. Priorities change. You've also been doing it for a hot minute. As you've been going through your career, what has helped you keep your passion? And really, what are those key highlights for you for our audience sake?
Yeah, super hot minute. And as you're speaking, I'm realizing I'm a lot older than you.
No, see how I said hot minute? I kept it cool.
Yeah. Oh man. No, it's true. Like I think back over the course of my career, there've been incredible peaks and incredible valleys. And so this question of how we sustain ourselves in the face of those peaks and valleys that come from all different sources, lots of pressures and stress, and obviously the work that first responders do every day, the things that they see, the situations they find themselves in the middle of, and honestly responsible for managing, takes a significant toll. At the same time, I have a colleague who talks about the fact that can actually improve your life and make you stronger. And so he talks about a concept called hunting the good. And it's kind of aligned with the gratitude piece. But we have to be careful there because we don't want to wander into sort of that toxic positivity area. And so, I think people have to kind of figure out what resonates with them and then pursue those things with intention. Because it's easy to kind of sit back and be like, oh, I can handle this. I can muddle through the muck and get through it. And I've got grit and stuff. But even the best of the best, the sort of proverbial strongest of the strong, can reach the end of their rope, as we've seen, very sadly across the industry. And in my opinion, there's no reason that these just amazing people who serve the community and serve as our safety net across the country should suffer in that way. And especially, when they get to really the end of their rope and what sadly happens there sometimes. So the more that we could talk about this, destigmatize this conversation, talk about what people individually can do, what leaders can do to support, the better. So thank you for that question.
The L3 Harris Extreme 400P radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapse and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at l3harris.com right now. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today. Yeah, I mean, that's... there was an experience I had at the very beginning of my career, and it was definitely a valley moment. And interesting that you use rope. Mistakes were made, being a novice and overly passionate and just being an idiot, to be honest. And I had a leader came up to me, and we were talking about like process of improvement, and really great mentor and positive thinker. And honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal, but I thought it was the big deal kind of moment. And he said to me, and it's always stuck with me, he said, the Lord gives you a lot of rope. Either you can hang yourself with it or you can pull yourself back up. And
Ooh, love.
basically, yeah, like I've learned that if I keep trying my best, even if I'm heading into a valley, I can use that same momentum that will propel me out of the valley. And that has just like those concepts of consistency and doing your best and never giving up. Um, the other thing I thought was interesting was that you just brought up was like the toxic gratitude mindset. I think sincere gratitude keeps us grounded. I think lying to yourself and pretending that everything's okay makes the situation much worse.
Oh,
Um,
I
true or
wholeheartedly agree with you. Yeah,
yeah,
no, absolutely agree with you. I think it almost leads you down that path of not taking the issues head on. And what I found over the course of my career is that taking the issues head on is it's extremely difficult, but it's what gets you through in a healthy way. Like it helps you process and it gets you through in a healthy way. If you take it out of the avoiding and pretending everything's fine, um, it doesn't work. And for us, we compartmentalize all these, smaller things all the time until they, get to the point where I've heard people say, I've compartmentalized so much, like I'm afraid to open that door. It's just going to like explode all over the place. And so if we can kind of face the things that trouble us and we struggle with along the way and process those things in a healthy way. And like, it's not pretty, right? I mean, like, man, I've had some days where, it's super messy and it's not pretty and it's not neat. And we are the rescuers and the caregivers, and we're the people that bring order out of chaos. And so for us to be in this just abject mess ourselves is sometimes really hard to think about, painful. But once you're in it, you're like, you know what? It's okay to be messy. Actually, it's what's helping me move through. And it's going to get me to sort of that maybe post-traumatic growth space where I need to be. Grabbing that bull by the horns, I think, is the way to go. The sort of, no, everything's fine, I'm fine, you're fine, the world's fine. I don't think that's necessarily productive. But at the same time, you're balancing that with hunting the good and being grateful and things like that.
it's such a complex issue because there are times where people really do just need to suck it up. Like it's really not that bad. The other time, like I'm a words guy, and when you say the word messy, but like that's the way to move forward. I have 3 little kids. Life is messy, legitimately, and it is like a blast though. Um, it reminded me of an experience. We have a mutual friend with Jake Shores. I have work in Portland that takes me there every once in a while, and so I asked Jake and I if I could take him out to dinner. And as we were driving around the city, he was noting to me, it like broke my heart, to be honest. He was like, "Oh, I responded to an accident over here. I responded to a home over here." And we and like as we were going, he
Yeah.
was explaining, and he was like reliving it. And I was like, "Man, like you have to live in the city of which you had some of those traumatic issues with." For me, most of my experiences are not at home. I've gone somewhere else to respond to something. I've gone to somewhere else to help something out. And as an emergency manager, let's be real, I'm not tactical. And so, except for one very awkward moment or difficult moment, but the reality is like being able to deal with stuff is important. I think I shared this experience maybe 2 years ago, um, where I used to live in Japan, and I got a phone call right after the tsunami in 2011
Mhm.
from my mother actually saying, "Oh my gosh, there's an earthquake in Japan." I was like, "Mom, there's earthquakes all the
Mhm.
time in Japan. Don't wake me up. Love you. Bye." Click. And I think it might have actually been a text message, to be honest. But I was like, "Why am I getting this text message?" And then I woke up and I saw the news. And while I was watching that, I was eating a bowl of cereal from my apartment. And you fast forward to Hurricane Matthew, and I was responding to Hurricane Matthew, and it was really rough for those people in Florida and along the coast, to be honest, going into Georgia and North Carolina. Um,
Mhm.
but I remembered even then, years prior, there's somewhere somebody's watching the news. It's sunny, and they're just eating their bowl of cereal. Like, and that really helped me understand like the scope of problems and to start dealing with like mental first aid and just like finding a relaxing in that. And then just going back to the
Oh,
gratitude of, I'm grateful that I am able to respond. I'm grateful that I have this skill set. I'm grateful for all the other tacticians are actually out there in the mud doing the job and trying to find some peace in that. I don't know. How do you find
that's a
your
great
in those valley
that
moments?
well, how do you find your peace? Well, first I want to share a story with you. I had a colleague, and he and his girlfriend were on a dive trip in the Gulf of Mexico, and their boat sank, and they ended up in the water overnight, thinking that not having any idea what was going to happen, and they were rescued by this Indian tanker ship from India, right?
Whoa.
And he said when they pulled them out of the water, the person that pulled them out said, "Today, sir, is your birthday." Like almost like a rebirthday, like
Yeah.
and then they went into port, and he said he felt like they just had this near death experience, and he felt like he's walking through the on the dirt roads through this little town, and the people of the town are like they're doing their laundry and they're playing with their children and they're going about their business, having no idea what he and his girlfriend had just been through. And he goes, I felt like I was walking in this fog, like 3 feet
Mm,
off the ground. And just the perspective, and for people that have responded to disasters, for people that respond on the daily to the people that are ill and injured in our communities, the things that you see, and then you leave that and you're walking around and people are just going about their business, having had no idea what you've been through, what the people you've been taking care of have been through. And I think that's something that sometimes we tend to struggle with because we have developed this fairly keen risk intelligence because of what we've seen. And to practice sort of prevention out there in the bigger world sometimes just challenges if people don't get it, but we do. And
mm.
I think that I think for some of us that creates some angst. But your question
Ye
was, how do you find peace?
well,
um
I think you kinda just nailed it, right? I mean, perspective, right?
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and you brought up the tsunami. This is an interesting tie-in, actually. So I was in a helicopter crash in 2005. So I have a pretty significant amount of experience with traumatic stress injury and that kind of thing. And I've you know worked a lot on figuring out how to find that peace. But my dad, who at the time I think was in his 80s, he said, well, and this was a little while after the crash, but I was really struggling. He goes,
Mm.
you know, at least you, and this was after the tsunami in Southeast Asia. He goes, at least you weren't in that tsunami in Southeast Asia. And I was just like, it was really funny because I was like, oh, damn, that really doesn't help me right now. But when I sat back and I thought about it, I was like, that's true. That is true. And the hard thing is like, you don't want to compare what you've been through to other people because
Yeah,
that's not productive. But bringing that perspective, because he doesn't work in this industry, so he doesn't know.
yeah.
But bringing that perspective, it was interesting and it made me think. And, I subsequently spent a lot of time studying, people that have been through, civilizations that have been through, groups of people that have been through, significant adversity just to help me understand my own. And I would think I was seeking to, find that perspective.
Yeah, I think it, I think we all should be a little bit more aware of the pain behind smiling eyes.
Yes.
If we could just
Yes.
be, I think there was recently I went through one of the most difficult years of my life. Despite everything that I've been through, most difficult moments of my life. I don't think anybody knew, except for my wife, obviously.
Mhm.
But like it was really really rough, and uh, yet I'd get comments like, "Man, like it must be nice, it must be nice, whatever those kind of comments." But I just tried to like real gratitude and appreciation if it's kept within isn't. If that makes any sense.
Right.
Like
Oh,
you,
holy.
you got to reach out to people and just be like be cool with them. And I get really sad for those responders, especially responders or military people who get like really
Mhm.
jaded by life after experiences.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
if anybody, like we should be like the people with the most joy because we've seen the worst. And whether it's on a micro scale or on a macro scale, like we've seen the worst, and we know that most situations are not that then. And if they're
Mhm.
not that, then we should be happy. And
Mhm.
we should be able to deal with that. And when we're not able to do that, it makes me sad for those people because it's like, man, like you're constantly living in these moments that if like you just took a deep breath and look around you, you're not in that extreme right now, and it's extreme for a reason that's not normal. And it kind of makes me sad, but at the same time, like you got to be super cool with people, and
Yeah.
maybe you're helping out somebody that you might not be so aware that they're going through it. I don't know.
I think that is probably the most important point of the day. There's that quote that says, "Be kind," for everybody's fighting a battle you know nothing about.
Hmm.
Uh, That I believe that is such a an absolute truth in so many ways, and even the person that's struggling might even not know,
Hmm.
how, sort of how deep their struggle is or what exactly it is they're struggling with, but this notion of being kind, and it's not sugarcoating and it's not coddling because I think it's Brene Brown that says clear is kind, like
Hmm.
honesty, transparency is kind, but doing it in such a way where you have empathy. You look at the approaches to conversation, like there's crucial conversation, it's a little bit of an older one, there's like radical candor and stuff. The
Hmm.
basis of radical candor is that you're demonstrating while having these kinds of conversations that you care about that person.
Yeah.
And it's easy in today's society to get jaded and to get cynical,
Hmm.
but it also depends on what information you're exposing yourself to,
Bingo.
right?
Yep.
So, and that's where I think the hunting the good piece comes in. Like, look at the people that do this work, first responders, military, and such. And then you go home and you watch like Chicago Fire
Hmm.
and whatever news station you choose, and all this kind of heavy duty stuff. Sometimes with intention, you have to come up for air and look at the brighter side of the world. And again, it's not to sugarcoat. It's just to say, like, you need a break from exposure sometimes.
Hmm.
And then, tapping into the resources that there's no good reason that the people that do this work should have to suffer. Like, the resources out there are fantastic.
Yeah.
So like things like eye movement desensitization or reprocessing, for
Hmm.
traumatic stress injury. Like that was, for me personally, that was a game changer.
Yeah.
And I don't want to oversell it because individuals have different needs, but just to say that there's great tools out there to help people manage and process, even if you've got decades of accumulation of trauma and traumatic
Yeah.
stress. There is help.
I'm a huge fan of AMDR. We had the incident commander for the Pulse nightclub shooting, Chief Brian Davis, on the show, and then I
Mm.
invited him out to one of our die pop trainings, and he talked about mental first aid and how for 2 years he was telling all of his people, "Hey, go see somebody, go see somebody." And after 2 years, one of his firefighters came up to him and said, "Hey, it's your turn." And
Yeah.
how
Wow, that's a good
transformative.
firefighter.
Yeah, I mean that's like take some guts to go to your chief too and say, "Hey,"
Yeah.
and he's an incredible guy, and he talks about that, and it kind of gave me some courage to say, okay, like, disaster tough. People think there's a comma there, like disaster, like tough luck, like
Yeah.
disaster tough is singular, it's all about being able to make tough decisions. And sometimes the toughest thing you can do is to wake up and say, hey, like you've been in the mix for a while. I don't want, as we're talking about this, I was thinking I'm going to have inherently an audience member or two, and everybody's great, but there will always be somebody who says, oh, I'm so glad I hit everything head on, and I'm so glad that I always have tough conversations with people. I'm so glad I'm super honest. Sometimes those people are just jerks, you know? Like, you got to combine the empathy. You don't want to be too soft, but what is that? There's a quote from a movie. Oh my gosh, what is that quote? Or actually, it might have been from Verbal Judo. There's a book I just read. Anyway, I can't remember where the quote comes from. It's not my own, but if it's like, if you're always mad, you're not mad. You're just a jerk.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's exactly it.
Funny enough, there's a guy that I follow on LinkedIn. I've met him several times in person. He is salt of the earth, one of the most kind, wonderful people that you'd ever meet. You would never know by his online persona. Every time he comments on somebody on a post, it's like, literally, this is the worst I've ever seen. This is terrible. This isn't.
Oh dear.
Like, what are you doing? Like, and it's like LinkedIn. Like, you're not like some like anonymous. And I don't think he has any idea. I don't even
it's
want
a
to tell him
professional site, or well, supposed to be anyway, professional platform.
Yeah, and like it's going back to that mentality. Sometimes traditional, emergency services of like headstrong, regimented, brutal feedback, and it's just not helpful. Like empathy and being able to look in, and I hate the idea of forgiving yourself. I'm not really a forgiving yourself kind of person, but I am a address it and move on, and therefore you can forget about it. And that has been a much better process. By the way, I had no idea that we were going to be talking about this today, because your background is incredible. So we eventually got to get onto that. But for the sake of gratitude, empathy, and what I call mental first aid, or addressing these things, I think.
Can I toss in something?
Yeah.
I would say grace. Like,
Grace,
if you're not
yes.
like hip on forgiveness, which forgiveness is a huge part of healing, but if it's more comfortable, like extending grace to other people, but also yourself. I deal with a lot of crews who are, upset with themselves if they don't save everybody.
Yeah.
And, I have to remind them sometimes, look, the train hit them before you got there, right? You did the best you could with what you had.
Yeah.
And
that doesn't work with my wife, though. You realize that? 'Cause I'm like, I know it looks like a train hit me, honey, but
you should show you
help me out. Yeah, exactly. Most of the time I look like a train hit me before. She's like, it happened after, like, you've gained 50 pounds since we got married. I'm like, hey, chill, okay?
No, it's.
Wait, I have a question. Does your humor get really dark the more that you're dealing with those valley moments? My humor gets really dark really fast. Is that how you process, or no?
I used to, and I'll tell you, and then, that's not unusual. I think that's totally normal for our, population of professionals and volunteers and stuff.
Yeah.
I did listen to a lecture by Laura Vanderneet Lipsky. She has a book called Trauma Stewardship. And she talked about, sort of that super dark humor, and sort of what that is a manifestation of. And, I started to think about it. And like, even when I was working in the emergency departments, if I was if there was a really like mean patient, verbally abusive or, assaultive, or anyway, that kind of thing, I have my professional self that I'm presenting, and like, I'm not going to be rude back. I'm always going to be professional, but if you're mean to me, you're not going to get the warm and fuzzy. Right.
Yeah.
But I would have I would have a thought bubble, like, this guy's a jerk, or, whatever, the word is. And what I realized is that if I just changed the way I thought and like eliminated that thought bubble, that it reduced my inner conflict. And I don't know if that's kind of, awesome. I don't know, overly philosophical, but I'm like, I'm going to change the way I think about this person. And the way that my strategy for that was looking at people like through the lens of, everybody has a story, and there's a reason that this person got to be this way. And it's not mine to judge. I was like mine to protect myself. Right. Yeah. Obviously. And I'm definitely not like, not to be abused.
Sure.
but I will manage that professionally. I'll try to eliminate, because my thought bubble is judgy, right?
Mm,
That's like, I'm
yeah.
gonna eliminate that, and then it reduces my internal conflict.
Hey, we just want to do a quick pause X to thank all of our sponsors with the Readiness Lab Podcast Network, L3 Harris, Forerunner, C. Bernie World, HQE Systems, Ampapar Response Training Center, Impulse, Doberman Emergency Management, and especially all of you who subscribe to the TRL Insider program and who are listening to this episode right now. Thank you so much for your support. Let's jump back in. So I guess I do it differently. If it's on the situation, I will mock the situation. I will laugh about the situation, whatever. It's on people. I now instantly go to the pain behind smiling eyes concept. Like if
Yes.
someone's like just like that rough, like what has gotten you there? So I don't think I've ever really done the people thing. I've always done the situation thing. I used to not know how to like process death. I like, those things were difficult for me, not in the fact of, like, scared about death, I just didn't know I legitimately, like, didn't know what to think about it.
But I think
Um,
that's key, right? Like
yeah.
that, I think that's a key point. Like, even, if people are in the sort of spirit of air quote humor, saying things that other people find offensive, the people that find it offensive, like, maybe you need to look, and again, the pain behind the eyes, like you're saying, right? Like, there's a reason that they said that. It wasn't necessarily to be offensive. Maybe that's the only way they know to cope. And in a world where people are super easily offended, that might help alleviate some of that. If we even have empathy, for the things we hear that we find off-putting, you
Yeah.
know?
I think we again, that thought it goes back to that complexity of, true appreciation, true gratitude. Also, sometimes you just suck it up, it's really not that bad, and sometimes it really is that bad for that person, and we can be human. So, uh, while we didn't talk about your background at all, that just means I get to have you come back on the show, and people are like, "Who is this amazing woman you just had on the show?" But
Oh, you're very
um,
kind. Thank
I
you.
mean, I uh, it is easy to identify genuine people. I think it's even harder to identify real genuine people that nobody recognizes that are genuine. So there's that problem. Um, but you have, between the helicopter crash and years of experience and those valley moments, it's obvious to see that you're legitimate and you care about your job. Um, if you're going to provide advice to somebody who is in a valley moment, or maybe in the beginning of their career, it's one of their first valley moments, what advice would you give to them right now?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that whatever situation you're in is temporary. And sometimes when people recognize that, then they won't move toward sort of a permanent solution for a temporary problem. And, you know, and reaching out to get help, you call this disaster tough. To me, the people that are tough as nails are the ones that reach out when they're in those valleys and they talk to somebody. Embracing what works for you. For me, faith, family, friends. There was a psychologist that I've heard speak, and she talks about that, Dr. Tanya Glenn out of Austin, Texas. And I share the same sort of coping strategies, faith, family, friends. Even getting outside for 20 minutes a day and going for a walk. We talk about the value of exercise and nutrition and hydration and rest and those types of things. People are like, yeah, I know. But the question is, do you do it? It doesn't have to be this super hardcore gym rat, going in and lift massive weights all the time. It's like, just get outside, get some fresh air, and get some perspective once again. Decrease exposure, take a break, look for the positive things in life, because we see a lot of the tough stuff and we're expected to manage it. So, there's a lot, but I think primarily recognizing that this is temporary, reaching out, talking to somebody. There's literally nothing that you're going through. Like, you're not alone. There's nothing that you're going through that somebody else, hasn't been through or isn't going through currently. And so just don't be afraid to reach out and tell somebody and talk about it. And the other thing is, be careful on your substance intake. I'm not saying, if you drink, don't drink. I'm just saying
Pina coladas.
if you find yourself, right. If you find yourself drinking more and more, certainly if you find yourself turning to other substances, like get some help right away, because that just compounds things, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, anything can become an addiction too. Like,
absolutely.
yeah. I think that's a great like mic drop moment, honestly, to end on. I think it's important for people to remember that this episode is airing in a couple weeks, so it's just right at the beginning of the new year, and I think it's a phenomenal way. People push back on New Year's resolutions. I think anytime somebody wants to set a goal to become better, I think fantastic. Even if it lasts 2 weeks, great. Try again, but whatever it is, like I hope that in 2025 people want to be a little more kind. Because, oh my gosh, we have a whole lot of narcissism. We have a whole lot of brutality. We have a whole lot of, selfishness. And I think we could all use a little bit more kindness, and how relieving and what a breath of fresh air it would be. Imagine if somebody you would think you're bracing for impact and they chose to be kind to you. We all have had those people.
Yes.
And you might not know, but you might be that to somebody else. They might brace for impact in dealing with you, but if you can choose to be kind, you can reduce tension all the way around. So, Krista, thanks
And
again.
it's the little things.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Doesn't have to be
understanding
huge.
that and then, for me in my current position, I have such reverence for the people that do this work. The people that are out there, the first responders, the military, like I said, the people that are the safety nets for our communities and our country and all of it, such reverence. And I hope people understand and know how much they are appreciated, in the work that they do day to day, even though it's so incredibly difficult sometimes. So if that's something that I could leave you with, that's what I'll do.
Can we be best friends?
Yes, please.
I just think you're great, honestly.
Oh, back out.
By the way, we're under here, but grace, reverence, peace, gratitude. We used all kinds of words that are related to sometimes faith, and I'm a Christian, and I'm happy to admit that. I'm also a person.
Me too.
There's no but there. Because of that, I constantly want to improve and be more kind, and I think this is a great reminder of that. And thank you, Krista, for taking the time to come and talk with me. And I really hope it helps somebody out when they're listening, especially if they're in a valley, and especially if they're not, actually, to be able to make sure that they're not just looking at themselves and looking at other people. I think they're all great reminders. Thank you so much.
Awesome. That was such a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. And I am looking forward to talk with you again.
Awesome. And if you happen to tune in, you, Krista, or anybody else, to EM Weekly or one of our other shows, help you guys do it. But for those audience members who are listening in, if you're going through a valley, faith, family, friends, I subscribe to that same methodology as well. Reach out to somebody, get that help. If there's no other resource out there, send us an email. Seriously, I've done it before in the past. I've pointed people in the direction, and happy to do it again. If you have a very specific question for Krista, you can send us an email at contact@thereadinesslab.com. If somebody has helped you out, or you just want to share something that you've learned along the way, when we post this on social media, add it to social media, say thanks, the whole deal, and got to do that cheesy line. As always, give us that 5-star rating and subscribe. And again, welcome to the 6th season of DTP. Peace.